Pocahontas is a name that is widely recognizable, regardless of what culture you're from, often symbolizing peace, bravery, and unity between Native Americans and European settlers. For many, her story is best known through the lens of the popular Disney animated film, where she is portrayed as a free-spirited and wise young woman who seeks to bridge two worlds through love and understanding. However, the true story of Pocahontas is much more nuanced and complex. This exploration seeks to uncover the historical reality of Pocahontas's life, tracing her journey from her early years as the daughter of a powerful Native American chief to her interactions with English colonists, her role in shaping diplomatic relations, and the legacy she left behind. By comparing the popularized version of her story with the real-life events, we can gain a deeper understanding of who Pocahontas truly was and the lasting impact of her life on American history. This is the true story of Pocahontas, explained. Pocahontas was born into the Powhatan Confederacy, a powerful political and social structure consisting of around 30 Algonquian-speaking tribes in the Tidewater region of Virginia. Her father, Wahunsenakau, better known as Chief Powhatan, was the paramount leader, holding authority over a vast territory. Pocahontas was born around 1596, during a time of significant change, as European powers began exploring and settling in North America. Her birth name, Matuaka, was kept relatively private due to cultural beliefs about the power of names, while her public nickname, Pocahontas, meaning playful one, reflected her outgoing and curious nature as a child. As the daughter of Chief Powhatan, Pocahontas held a position of importance within her society, though not in the same way a European princess might have. Powhatan society did not have hereditary monarchies in the European sense, and leadership roles were often earned through diplomacy, warfare, and political alliances. However, Pocahontas's close relationship with her father and her frequent presence during diplomatic events suggests she was more than just a typical child. She was likely being groomed for an influential role in her community. The Powhatan people lived a semi-sedentary lifestyle, relying on agriculture, fishing, hunting, and gathering. They grew crops like corn, beans, and squash, and lived in villages along the rivers. In Powhatan society, the roles of men and women were distinct, yet both were equally demanding and vital, contributing to the well-being of the entire community. For women like Pocahontas, responsibilities went beyond bearing and raising children. They were in charge of building the homes, known as yahakans, which they often owned. Women were also the primary farmers, responsible for planting and harvesting crops, as well as preparing and serving food. They collected water for cooking and drinking, gathered firewood to keep the fires burning continuously, and created mats for the inside and outside of the houses. Additionally, they crafted baskets, pots, cordage, and utensils such as wooden spoons, platters, and mortars. Women even acted as barbers for the men and processed the meat brought back by hunters, tanning hides to make clothing. Another essential skill Pocahontas had to master as she grew was foraging for edible plants. She needed to recognize and identify various useful plants throughout all seasons. By around 13, the typical age Powhatan girls reached adulthood, Pocahontas would have acquired these skills, marking her readiness to take on the responsibilities of an adult woman in her society. She would have participated in these activities from a young age, but her status as the chief's daughter would have afforded her a degree of privilege. In the Disney version, Pocahontas is portrayed as a much older, almost ethereal figure, deeply in tune with the natural world. The film opens with her as a free-spirited young woman, standing on a cliff, contemplating her future. She is shown as introspective and adventurous, often running through the forests or canoeing along the river, accompanied by her animal companions, Miko, a raccoon, and Flit, a hummingbird. The Disney Pocahontas is painted as a spiritual and philosophical character, often speaking to the wind and seeking wisdom from nature. Her connection to the earth is reinforced by her conversations with Grandmother Willow, an ancient talking tree, who serves as her guide. This depiction emphasizes Pocahontas's harmony with nature, framing her as someone who values peace, unity, and balance above all else. The historical Pocahontas was a young girl, likely around 10 to 12 years old when the English arrived in Virginia. In contrast, Disney presents her as a fully grown adult woman, complete with the maturity and responsibilities of someone well into their late teens or early 20s. This age difference significantly alters the perception of her role in the story. Disney's version amplifies her role as a romantic figure and peacebringer, emphasizing her personal agency in ways that are less plausible for the real Pocahontas at her young age. Additionally, the Disney portrayal heavily leans into a spiritual and environmental theme, which, while not inaccurate in suggesting that Native American cultures have a deep connection to the natural world, simplifies and distorts the more complex cultural practices of the Powhatan people. The real Pocahontas, while certainly living in harmony with nature as part of her community's lifestyle, was primarily a young girl navigating a turbulent time of cultural collision and survival. Pocahontas' first interactions with the English colonists came in 1607 when the Jamestown settlement was established in her homeland. Captain John Smith, one of the leaders of the colony, became a key figure in the history of Pocahontas due to the famous and often debated story of her saving his life. According to Smith's later accounts, he was captured by Powhatan's warriors and brought before the chief. There, as he was supposedly about to be executed, Pocahontas intervened, placing her head upon his to prevent the execution. The accuracy of this story has been heavily questioned by historians. Some believe it was a symbolic act, part of a ritual or ceremony to incorporate Smith into the Powhatan community, rather than a literal life-saving event. Others suggest Smith may have exaggerated or misinterpreted what occurred. His accounts, written years after the event, differ from earlier writings, leading to speculation that he may have embellished the story to enhance his reputation. Despite the mythologized nature of this encounter, Pocahontas did develop a relationship with the English settlers. As a young girl, she frequently visited Jamestown, bringing food and supplies during times of need, which likely helped keep the colony from starving in its early years. However, this relationship was not born from romance, as later legends would suggest, but rather from political necessity. Pocahontas was in many ways a bridge between the two cultures, but her actions were guided by diplomacy, not affection. In the Disney version, the relationship between Pocahontas and John Smith is at the center of the story, portrayed as a deep and immediate romantic connection. Pocahontas first sees John Smith from a distance when he and the other Englishmen arrive. She is curious about him and soon follows him into the forest, where they meet face to face. This meeting is depicted as a moment of instant chemistry, with Pocahontas and Smith quickly developing feelings for one another despite the cultural and language barriers. In the film, Pocahontas is the one who bridges the divide between the settlers and her people, doing so out of love for John Smith. She teaches him to see the world from her perspective, showing him the beauty of nature and the importance of living in harmony with the earth. Their bond symbolizes hope for peace, with Pocahontas leading the charge to stop a potential war between the two groups. The historical relationship between Pocahontas and John Smith was almost certainly not romantic. Pocahontas was a child when she met Smith, who was in his late 20s or early 30s. The idea of a romance between them is largely a creation of later retellings, including Smith's own writings and subsequent interpretations in literature and popular culture. Disney's film plays into this myth, transforming Pocahontas into an adult woman who falls in love with the adventurous and noble John Smith. In reality, Pocahontas' interactions with Smith were more political than personal. As the daughter of Powhatan, she had a diplomatic role in maintaining some degree of peace between the settlers and her people, though this peace was always tenuous. The film simplifies and romanticizes these interactions, turning them into a love story that drives the entire plot. This creates a more accessible narrative for audiences, but it also overlooks the complexities of Pocahontas' actual role as a figure navigating the dangerous and delicate balance of power between her people and the English settlers. Furthermore, the film emphasizes Pocahontas' agency in seeking peace out of love for John Smith, whereas historically, her role as a mediator was likely more influenced by her father's political strategies and the larger needs of her people. The movie diminishes the broader political context and frames her actions as purely personal, which contrasts sharply with the reality of her life in early Jamestown. The myth of Pocahontas saving John Smith from execution is central to both versions of the story, but in the Disney film, it becomes a key moment of love and heroism, while in the historical narrative, it is viewed more critically as either a misunderstood or exaggerated event. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. In the years following the establishment of Jamestown, the relationship between the English settlers and the Powhatan Confederacy was fraught with tension. Initially, Pocahontas' visits to the colony and her provision of food helped establish a fragile peace. However, as the settlers' demands grew, so did the friction between the two groups. The English wanted more land and resources, and their expansionist goals clashed with the Powhatans' desire to protect their territory. By 1610, tensions had escalated into outright conflict. The First Anglo-Powhatan War was marked by skirmishes, raids, and distrust on both sides. During this time, Pocahontas' role shifted. She stopped visiting Jamestown as frequently and became less involved in direct interactions with the English. However, her life would take a significant turn in 1613 when she was captured by Captain Samuel Argall, an English sea captain. Argall's plan was to use Pocahontas as leverage to negotiate with her father, Powhatan. The English demanded the return of prisoners and stolen weapons in exchange for Pocahontas' release. Powhatan did not immediately comply, and Pocahontas remained in captivity for over a year. During this time, she was treated relatively well and began to assimilate into English culture. She was taught Christianity, and in 1614, she was baptized and given the Christian name Rebecca. Her conversion and subsequent marriage to English tobacco planter John Rolfe became significant in ending hostilities, at least temporarily, between the English and the Powhatans. This marriage, while a personal union, also symbolized a political alliance and created a period of relative peace known as the Peace of Pocahontas. In the Disney film, Pocahontas is portrayed as the key figure in preventing a full-scale war between her people and the English settlers. The conflict between the two groups is presented as a misunderstanding, driven by fear and cultural differences. The English are depicted as coming to the New World in search of gold, led by the greedy Governor Ratcliffe, while the Powhatan people are shown as peaceful inhabitants of the land, eager to protect their way of life. Pocahontas' romantic relationship with John Smith is central to the resolution of this conflict. She teaches Smith to see the world through her eyes, showing him that there is no gold and that the land's real value lies in its natural beauty and resources. As tensions escalate, with both sides preparing for war, Pocahontas intervenes at the last moment to stop her father, Chief Powhatan, from killing John Smith. Her actions lead to a truce, with both groups laying down their arms. Smith is injured while saving Powhatan from an English gunshot, and the movie concludes with Pocahontas and her people watching as Smith returns to England for medical treatment, leaving their love story unresolved but peaceful. The Disney portrayal simplifies a deeply complex and violent conflict between the English settlers and the Powhatan Confederacy. In reality, Pocahontas' capture was not part of a romantic story, but a tactic of war. Her role in preventing conflict was not through a romantic connection with John Smith, but through her strategic marriage to John Rolfe, a union that helped broker peace. The real Pocahontas was much more a victim of the conflict than a hero who could single-handedly stop a war. Her capture and forced assimilation into English culture were part of the colonists' broader efforts to subdue and control the native population. Disney, in contrast, places all the responsibility for peace on Pocahontas' shoulders, turning her into a larger-than-life figure who transcends cultural differences through love and wisdom. Moreover, while the film frames the conflict as driven by misunderstanding and greed, the historical reality was more rooted in the English settlers' desire for land and resources. This desire led to violent confrontations, with both sides committing acts of aggression. Pocahontas' real role as a young woman caught between two powerful groups seeking survival is largely overshadowed by the film's romanticized narrative, which downplays the colonial expansion and the brutal realities of war in favor of a message of unity and harmony. The concept of Pocahontas as a mediator is true to a degree, but the context and nature of her mediation in real life were far more complex, driven by political machinations rather than personal feelings. As we just discussed, Pocahontas' marriage to John Rolfe in April 1614 was a significant turning point in her life and in the relations between the English and the Powhatan Confederacy. John Rolfe was a tobacco planter, and his successful cultivation of tobacco became one of the key economic drivers for the Virginia colony. The marriage was a strategic move, likely encouraged by both the English and the Powhatan leadership. For the English, Pocahontas' conversion to Christianity and marriage to an Englishman symbolized the potential for assimilation and civilizing Native Americans. For Powhatan, the union represented a way to maintain some level of influence and negotiate more favorable terms with the increasingly powerful English settlers. In 1616, Pocahontas, now known as Lady Rebecca Rolfe, traveled to England with her husband, their young son Thomas, and a delegation of Powhatan representatives. Her journey to England was part of a larger public relations effort by the Virginia Company, which wanted to attract more investment and settlers. Pocahontas was paraded as a symbol of the successful relationship between the English and Native Americans, proof that the colonists could civilize the indigenous population. In England, Pocahontas was treated as a curiosity and a celebrity. She attended royal court and was presented to King James I and Queen Anne, where she was introduced as a civilized savage, a term used to describe Native Americans who had been assimilated into European culture. Her presence in England was highly publicized, and she became a key figure in promoting the Virginia colony. During her time in England, Pocahontas also encountered John Smith again. By this time, Smith had published accounts of his adventures in Virginia, including his version of Pocahontas' supposed rescue of him. Their reunion was reportedly cold and awkward, with Pocahontas accusing Smith of betraying her people and misrepresenting their relationship. Tragically, in early 1617, as Pocahontas and her family prepared to return to Virginia, she fell gravely ill. It is believed she contracted an illness, possibly pneumonia or tuberculosis. She died in March 1617 at the age of around 21 and was buried in Gravesend, England. Her death was a great loss to both the Powhatan people and the English colonists, and her legacy would be carried on through her son, Thomas Rolfe. In the Disney film, Pocahontas' story ends much earlier, with a dramatic but peaceful resolution to the conflict between her people and the English settlers. After preventing the execution of John Smith and averting a war, Pocahontas chooses to stay with her people as John Smith sails back to England, injured but alive. The film ends with Pocahontas standing on a cliff, watching Smith's ship sail away, leaving their love story unresolved. Disney's version of the story focuses on Pocahontas' connection to her land and her people, emphasizing that her decision to stay is rooted in her loyalty to her culture. There is no mention of her later marriage to John Rolfe, her journey to England, or the broader political implications of her life. The romantic arc between Pocahontas and John Smith is left open-ended, with the possibility of their reunion in the future, although no sequel explores this. Disney's Pocahontas is framed as a timeless heroine who chooses to stay with her people, symbolizing unity and strength. The historical Pocahontas, however, experienced deep cultural dislocation, converting to Christianity, marrying into the colonial society and traveling far from home, only to die young in a foreign land. The romanticized version of her life contrasts sharply with the real story of a woman who was caught between two worlds, ultimately becoming a symbol of both peace and loss. After her death in 1617, Pocahontas's legacy continued to evolve both in the New World and in England. Her life and story became a powerful symbol of the potential for cooperation and peace between Native Americans and European settlers, though this image was often manipulated by those seeking to justify colonial expansion and the subjugation of indigenous peoples. Her son, Thomas Rolfe, grew up in England but later returned to Virginia, where he became an important figure in the colony. Through him, Pocahontas's bloodline continued, and many Virginians today claim descent from her, seeing her as a founding figure in both Native American and early colonial history. Her descendants, often referred to as First Families of Virginia, played a significant role in the political and social development of the colony. However, Pocahontas's legacy is complicated by the fact that her story has been used to support various political agendas. The image of Pocahontas as a civilized Native American who embraced Christianity and English culture was used to promote the idea that indigenous peoples could be assimilated into European society. This narrative supported the colonists' efforts to control Native American land and resources, masking the more violent aspects of colonization. Pocahontas's legacy as a peace symbol has been romanticized and mythologized to the point where much of her true story has been lost or distorted. In the centuries following her death, her life was romanticized in plays, books, and art, often portraying her as a noble savage who willingly gave up her culture for the sake of peace with the English. This narrative became deeply entrenched in American culture, culminating in the Disney film that further solidified Pocahontas as a symbol of unity, but one largely removed from the realities of her life and the broader consequences of colonization. Both versions of Pocahontas's story have their place in popular imagination, but it is important to recognize the differences between the historical reality and the romanticized narrative. The true legacy of Pocahontas is one of resilience, survival, and loss, set against the backdrop of one of the most tumultuous periods in early American history.